And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast, fresh off an absolutely epic weekend of basketball and an especially epic Sunday where the Sixers are gone and Luka had an incredible game and Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray had 50 in the same game. Just an incredible day, honestly. And Clips Mavs capped by Luka's buzzer beater. Just an absolute legend moment. Maybe the game of the year in the NBA, although I'm sure there were good games in November that have been completely erased from my brain. And this is the best series of the playoffs. It's the only series right now that's 2-2. So let's talk about it with the one and only Tim MacMahon from ESPN. How are you, sir?
Howdy, partner. Doing all right.
Hanging in, right? Hanging in. So that was a game.
Wow. Yeah, and look, Mavs are down 21 in the second quarter. No Porzingis. I'm thinking, okay, I need to get ready to write my kind of Mavs season obit, looking forward to the future. And basically, Luka decided, no, that ain't going to be the story. That's not that's not the way this is going to go down. And under any circumstances, that's one of the best playoff performances I've ever seen. I mean, the guy had 43, 17, and 13, numbers that have never been put up by a single player in one playoff game. Capped it with a buzzer beater, the first guy to put up 40-plus and hit a buzzer beater since Michael Jordan. Actually, I think Kawhi last year too. But regardless, just ridiculous. And then, by the way, this dude's a game-time decision, right, on an ankle that he sprained about 40 hours earlier. I mean, and he's 21 years old. It's insane.
And he looked a little ginger in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game when he was landing. He settled for a mid-range jumper on his first shot of the game, which he's really excised those kind of shots from his pick-and-roll game. And I thought, ooh, that's not a good sign. And then, of course, he absolutely explodes. And that shot, like, it was going in. You knew it was going in. As soon as he launched it, I was like, it's going in. It has to go in.
But you know what? I agreed with Trey Burke. Trey Burke said, honestly, when he let it go, I thought he could have gotten a better shot.
I like Trey Burke caping for like the analytics guys who are like, hero ball. Trey Burke is like, actually, we really could have probably generated a better shot.
But look, I mean, first of all, how Reggie Jackson ends up guarding him, I don't know, man. That can't happen if you're the Clippers there. I understand there was a switch. Kawhi's got to fight through it. You can't have Reggie Jackson on him. But I thought Luka did him a favor by settling for that step back. That's the best shot the Clippers could hope he takes in that situation. But to your point, this was going to be Luka's day. He was going to knock down that shot. And you know what? The other crazy thing about it, the Mavericks' one massive flaw all year long has been they've been one of the worst clutch teams in the league. And a lot of that's that Luka has really struggled in the clutch all season long. And he had a lot of great clutch moments as a rookie. But this year, last minute of fourth quarter regulation on go-ahead or potential game-tying shots, he was 0 of 10 in the regular season. 0 of 10. He was 3 of 3 in the last 50 seconds yesterday.
I was going to say his last 50 seconds of overtime were layup, buzzer-beating 3. I don't mind the look only because 3.7 seconds left. For some reason, and by the way, this goes to show you that even the very best will mess up sometimes. For some reason, Rick Carlisle calls a play to throw the ball into the backcourt 80 feet from the rim, knowing the Clippers have a foul to give. They give it with 3.7 seconds left. Perfect. For the Clippers, that is like perfect. If you get a shot where you can see the rim cleanly, 3.7, like I can live with it. Like if you get a clean, on-balance look, I don't really care what it is. It's a decent shot depending on, now if it's, Boban taking a step back 32-footer. Well, that probably goes in too because Boban's a legend, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and look, the other thing is, I mean, they're down 2. I'm pretty sure Luka wanted to go ahead and win that thing then because, like we said, he's a game-time decision on a bum ankle. And not only did he play, not only did he produce these crazy numbers, he played the most minutes that he's played in any NBA game. So I don't think 5 more minutes is something that the Mavericks necessarily wanted at that point.
This dude is absolutely incredible. I mean, and by the way, so this series has been so entertaining. The cumulative score after 4 games is Clippers +1. much has been made of Dallas having the best offensive rating in the history of the NBA this season. Both of these teams are exceeding that through 4 games. It has been a lot of free throws, but low turnovers, low offensive rebounds, basically like a first shot plus free throw series, like a clean half-court series, middling pace, about what you would expect. And by the way, I think if I'm looking at it right, the broader story of the playoffs so far, this will change, is 7 of the 16 teams in the playoffs midway through the first round are scoring above Dallas's regular season number. The offenses are absolutely out of control. And, it's like the announce crew was talking about it, different ways to stop Luka, and we can talk about that. Should they come up to the level of the screen? Should they trap him? Should they blitz him? Should they throw foreign objects at him from the bench? The Clippers can't stop. The Mavericks can't stop the Clippers either. And this played out. I mean, in my podcast preview, I said, this might be a series in which the Mavericks' chance to win is just to outscore the Clippers. I don't know that either of these teams are going to have an awesome answer. These offenses are just so good that I don't really know what the answer is. Do you if you're the Clippers? I mean, I know they're spitballing 25 different things. Do any of them look attractive to you?
Well, getting Pat Beverly back, I think, is their best chance, but I don't know if that's happening. Obviously, this calf has been something that's been bothering him, for a while now, and I we'll see if he's able to go in this series. But obviously, the more Pat Beverly you have, the less Reggie Jackson you have, and I think that would be a big boost to the Clippers defense. And it's funny, the Mavericks Rick Carlisle made a major adjustment to improve their defense going into this, where you talk about the best offense in NBA history statistically. Their best lineup with Seth Curry, plugged in and them playing small with Porzingis as a lone big. They went away from that this series because they wanted Maxi Kleber guarding Kawhi. And look, Kawhi is averaging 30 some odd. I mean, he's lighting it up. But all things considered, Maxi's actually done a solid job on him. You look at the numbers with Maxi defending him versus everybody else, and it's, okay and whoa.
So I'm going to come out and say I don't believe those numbers. I believe that they're real. I just don't believe that they indicate anything real. To me, Kawhi looks very comfortable in any matchup the Mavericks throw at him, including Maxi. He looks like he has a lot of space to get any shot that he wants. And I think Rick felt that too because they started doubling him in the second half yesterday. And it worked. It didn't work when Marcus Morris hit a 3 to put them in the lead. But in general, it got the ball out of his hands. He committed a couple turnovers, or the Clippers committed a couple turnovers. That's one. But people want to say, the Clippers should double Luka. It's like, okay, he's a top 3 passer on planet Earth. I don't know that that's actually going to work.
Yeah, do you want to double Luka and give up a clean 3 to Seth Curry, or a clean 3 to Tim Hardaway, the two guys who, in terms of high volume catch and shoot 3-point guys, they were the 2 most efficient dudes in the league. And that's 1, because they can really shoot, and 2, because Luka's creating a lot of really, really good 3-point looks for him.
He gets in the lane, and he's, with a live dribble, just kind of turning a little bit this way and turning 10 degrees that way. And then all of a sudden, the ball is in the corner, and someone's wide open. You're like, how the hell did he even see that? It's right. What the passes he's throwing are like next level passes. They are Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, LeBron James level passes.
Yeah, he throws passes that you don't see until they are on the way there, And I mean, like you said, he's driving, he's in traffic, he's jumping, he's leaning, he's kind of firing these little sidearm things, and next thing you know, Seth Curry is catching the ball cleanly in the shooter's pocket and going up and knocking it down. I mean, and then the lob game that he has, and it's Harden-esque, his ability to go up. You think he's shooting a floater, he's so good at finishing. Next thing you know, he just kind of dumps it off to Porzingis or Kleber, whoever is finished. I mean, the guy it's insane.
I think part of the answer is, if there is an answer, and again, there may not be, but part of the answer that I would try if I were the Clippers is, to whatever degree is possible without warping my offense, I need to make him work a little harder on defense. And to Luka's credit, he guarded Paul George some last night and guarded him well. Now, Paul George has absolutely stunk up the joint this entire series, and the biggest adjustment the Clippers can make is to have Paul George not suck. So if I were telling Doc Rivers what to do, I would say have Paul George play better. He's 20 of 69 from the field. Those are real numbers, 20 of 69. He has 61 points in 4 games. Seth Curry and Tim Hardaway Jr. have outscored him, and Trey Burke is close. It's just not in his defense, by the way, very quietly has been like 10% worse this season. He hasn't quite been the same. Did
Kawhi Leonard downgrade on co-stars, leaving Siakam to go to Paul George? I'm just asking.
Wow,
it's just a question. I ask questions. I'm a reporter. I ask questions.
No, I don't think so. Although I love Spicy P. A Spicy P and Playoff P. 2 Ps.
Spicy P, I think, has lived up to his nickname. Playoff P, not so much.
Yeah, Playoff P is like lowercase p until further notice.
Paul,
by the way, I love Paul George. Paul George is a boss. Paul George is going to show up. He just has to show up now. It's too it's got to be now.
Better get there quick. And one thing that's with Luka, he is versatile enough defensively that the Mavericks can pick different matchups to try to hide him on, if that makes sense. He can guard several different positions. You just want him to have the least challenging defensive assignment. Right now, they can hide him on Paul George.
Well, for the most part, they have put him on Marcus Morris. And I just think, even if it's like, you don't want to have Marcus Morris become like one of the focal points of your offense, really. But the Clippers, for as good as their offense is, and these are the 2 best offensive teams in the NBA, they can get a little aimless on offense. And I thought Paul George had a couple of shots late in the game, one in the fourth quarter, one in overtime, or maybe one in the third, one in the fourth, where the possession was just kind of like Paul George dribbles around and shoots a 20-footer. On one of them, he's
in no kind of rhythm, obviously.
Yeah, and one of them, he had Kawhi set a screen for him to get a switch of a worse defender into Dorian Finney-Smith, a much better defender, and then he like jacked a 20-footer over Dorian. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to see the Clippers just like, Doc is a great play design guy. Like, there can't be such a big gap between the out of timeout plays and everything else in terms of how much activity is going on. Give me like Marcus Morris sets a ball screen and then pops off a flare screen. Give me like a pick and roll into a pin down for Paul George. Like something. Give me like Marcus Morris screens for Kawhi and then sets a pin down. Just give me like a little juice. And it's so easy to not do that because Kawhi is so freaking good that all you have to do is give him the ball. But they just need a little more. Sometimes they could use a little more purpose. And if a downstream effect of that is that Luka has to run around a little bit more on defense, like I'm all in for that.
Yeah, and look, the other thing that the Clippers are missing in this series is the guy who's going to be the 6th man of the year. I mean, Montrezl Harrell has been not a non-factor, but a negative factor for the Clippers, and it's understandable. I mean, the guy missed all the season schedule. His grandmother passed away. He was out of the bubble, obviously for tragic family reasons. So this is a guy who is trying to chip off 5+ months of rust in a playoff series. I'm sure he doesn't have, feel like he has his legs, his rhythm, his conditioning. And so, this dude who was I think he's going to be the 6th man of the year. I think he should be, is just giving the Clippers not only absolutely nothing, but he's getting beat up on the other end by Boban.
Boban's had a nice little series.
Yeah. And you would think Montrez is going to more than make the Mavs pay for playing Boban on, with his offense, as a pick and roll guy, as with the ability to face up and attack. He's just not there right now, and so Boban's a foot taller than him. He's just can jump hook him or that little funky looking turnaround, all that, and it's like so they don't have their perennial all-star because Paul George hasn't showed up. They don't have the guy who's going to be the 6th man of the year because Montrezl Harrell isn't there. And so here it is, they're and you know what? The Clippers, when Doc Rivers is coming out post game talking about, he felt like they were, I think, emotionally weak was his word.
Yeah, Doc wasn't messing around yesterday.
I mean, they're.
Hey, by the way, you know what the
they're a little
Mavericks have
rattled.
to say to do this? Like, we don't have this, we don't have that. Cry me a freaking river.
Oh, no
Kristaps
question.
Porzingis didn't play Game 4. He got ejected from Game 2, Game 1 on a absolutely bogus two technicals. Jalen Brunson's hurt. Dwight Powell's hurt. Our bench is in tatters, but we're making it work. You know what? We're making it work with a guy we just picked up in Trey Burke. Seth Curry's balling. We're finding minutes for Boban, and he's not getting us killed defensively. In fact, he's producing offensively. Like, we're making it work. Cry me a river about Pat Beverly.
Oh no, there's no sympathy. There's no sympathy for sure. But if we're talking about reasons why, let's be honest. We thought the Clippers would probably coast in this series, and I know going into the bubble, people asked me about the Mavericks. I said I think the Mavericks are a real threat to make a run if they don't have to face the Clippers in the first round. I didn't think they can make this series competitive, but shows what I know.
There is no capital A answer to Luka. He's too good, and the Mavericks have too much shooting around him. The best players, there is no scheme. There's just, you either have an elite defender, and even that hasn't proven to be enough, for the Clippers, or you just mix up a lot of stuff. So like double Luka, you might buy yourself 4 minutes of Tim Hardaway Jr. randomly missing open threes, or
Right.
like a couple blown layups or something. That's all you're going to buy. You got to do that and then do something else. I think the closest thing there is to me is a combination of everything, by which I mean, like, I think they did stumble upon something with Marcus Morris at center late in the game, in Game 4. And just as much as you can switch, because
Yeah.
he is just eating up your big men on the pick and roll. He's eating them alive no matter what they do. As soon as he sees it once, the second time he solves it. He's just eating them for dinner and lunch and breakfast. So the switching, yeah, look, you're going to have Reggie Jackson on him. That's bad. You're going to have Lou Williams on him. That's bad. Like,
That's worse.
Even when Pat Bev is in the game, like, there's still going to be someone who is on him where you're like, he can beat this dude one-on-one.
Well, and let's be honest, he's too big for Pat Bev.
Pat Bev likes the bigger guys, but yeah, he's too big for Pat Bev.
He don't like Luka.
Don't mess with Luka. Don't get under his skin. Don't try to. So you switch, and then to me, there's a difference between just double, and like switch, and then send the double late in the shot clock, where all he's got left in him is one pass, right? Like that is like, then you're dictating the terms of engagement, but you're also using the shot clock as your friend and as your extra teammate. That's like Nick Nurse has found a way where, like, against all of these elite offenses, the Raptors are dictating the terms of engagement. And the penalty for that is they're giving up a lot of threes, but they're giving up threes to people that they would rather have beat them, and they're making them shoot it against the shot clock. And it's really hard to do that. It's really, really hard to do that. And that's why I say I don't think there's one scheme. I think it has to be a combination of everything. And guess what? Even that's not going to work for like an entire quarter, an entire half. You're just going to pray to the basketball gods that those dudes miss shots.
Yeah, and Doc's whole thing all series long has been, hey, I can live with Luka lighting it up as a scorer. We can't let him have both. We can't let him, score 43 and dish out 13 assists. But like you said, it's easier said than done when a guy is that big, that smart, and that skilled. And the skill to me, like the step back, again, I think that's a shot you want him taking, and you'll live with the odds and the percentages. But he's just so skilled as a finisher in the lane around the basket. And he's not obviously some crazy explosive leaper, but dude, you look at his finishing numbers, he is absolutely elite because he gets where he wants to go, and he's just so crafty in there.
You nailed it. That's the most important thing that happened this season for Luka Doncic. That is the biggest driver of his ascendancy from all-star to MVP level player is his finishing in the lane. These bigger guys have no shot. He just goes through them, around them, gets them off balance, right-handed, left-handed, off the glass, not off the glass. He has every possible finish in the lane. And these dudes don't have a chance. He never dunks. I can't even picture, as he dunked, like I'm sure he's dunked. I cannot close my eyes and picture Luka Doncic dunking.
Yeah, every once, put it this way, when he dunks, it's still, ooh, whoa, a Luka dunk. They're like, a special little treat. but he's just so good at getting in there, using his body, kind of twisting and contorting, and just like you said, little floaters, little off the glass, whatever. I mean, from all different angles. And also part of it is, look, the big question about Luka coming in to the league was, can he be in shape? Is he going to be athletic enough to be a superstar? Everybody knew he was going to be good. Would he be athletic enough to be a superstar? And to his credit, he has worked on his body. He worked hard last summer. He worked hard during this hiatus when he was back in Slovenia.
He's better now than he was in March. I don't know what he did between March and now, but he wasn't. I mean, he was awesome in February, March. This is a better player.
Well, he treated it like another offseason, and he did. And look, the other thing is he was beat to hell in March. I mean, he'd sprained that right ankle twice.
Right.
He had a sprained thumb. He had a sprained wrist. And so I think he was one of the guys who benefited most. And then, of course, he sprains his left ankle, and he's still able to go out and put up a historic triple-double. But, all things considered, he was really beat up. And I think the time away, the time to heal, and then the time to continue working on his body. And it's not like, look, he's never going to be in a dunk contest, obviously, but he's just that much quicker. And he's so good at being able to kind of change speeds and slow it down, but once he's quick enough to get guys on his hip or on his back, and once that happens, forget it. I mean, there was a play yesterday where he's got Kawhi Leonard on his back, and it's just like, let me give you a piggyback ride, little fella. That's Kawhi Leonard.
Well, and the level of problem solving is unbelievable, and this is why there is no one answer. So there was a possession late in the third quarter where Marcus Morris was on him and Kawhi was on whoever was screening for him, I think Kleba. And he knew they were going to switch because that's what the Clippers are doing. And so he faked towards the pick and triggered the switch and then rejected it and went the other way and either got a layup or a foul. I can't remember. He's got every counter for what you're doing. And when he knows what you're going to do beforehand, he's got 4 different counters that he can kind of pick from. My favorite pass that he threw was just a little itty-bitty one early in the game. He got Zubats on a switch, and poor Zubats in those scenarios. It just hasn't gone very well. And the Mavericks, to their credit, are not messing around. Anytime Zubats is stuck on Porzingis or Kleba, whoever is the center screener, they're going right to Luka pick and roll. They're not messing around. So Zubats is on him, and Zubats drops back. And Luka pulls the ball out. And Luka, out of the corner of his eye, sees Paul George guarding Trey Burke, kind of looking at him in the left corner, right next to Luka. And he takes a dribble back like he's going to shoot a 3. Paul George lunges at him, and he just throws this little sidearm pass to Trey Burke for a corner 3. I'm like, man, that was mean. He just manipulated poor Paul George and got Trey Burke a corner 3 like that. It was awesome.
Well, it's like Rick Carlisle said. He sees the game in 6G. Forget about 5G. He sees it at a different level. And, look, when people make the Bird, the Magic comparisons, even the LeBron comparisons, that's what you're talking about. Just the way that these guys not only see the floor and see, all their teammates and all the defenders, but see what the next move is going to be and just pick it apart.
Well, my favorite thing about him has always been how good he is in little in-between moments like that. Like, there are some guys who they commandeer the offense, they have the ball, they run a pick and roll. I know all my reads off of that corner shoot over here, lob dunk, kick out, blah, blah, blah. And they don't have the same ability when the game is kind of in flux, when it's a little muddy, right? Like when it's clear cut, they know how to do everything. It's great. Luka has always had this little, those little in-between moments. He's like a really clever give-and-go player. Like, he'll pick up his dribble, hand it over here. He and DJ actually had a nice chemistry with that last year, and he'll cut to the rim. He's just a very smart, intuitive, in-the-moment kind of player. And, he problem solves everything. I talked about this in Game 3. There were a couple possessions early when Zubats got switched onto him, and he dribbled out like he was going to take a step-back 3. And the Clippers used that as an opportunity to switch again, bring somebody from the wing, like, you're above the three-point arc, we're going to bring the guy next to you and switch Zubats out. He saw that once and was like, all right, I'm not doing that again. When I see Zubats, I'm just driving at him and I'm laying it up. Like, he sees it once and he picks it apart. We'll see. I just don't. I mean, you want to talk about adjustments? It's like your adjustment might just be better on offense. Like adjustment for these teams might be even better on offense.
Have Paul George hit some shots.
I would like to see Marcus Morris. They're getting away with like Seth Curry on Marcus Morris a lot. And if I'm going to use Marcus Morris on offense, it's in those moments where he has like a 6-inch, 50-pound height advantage or whatever, height and weight advantage. I'd like to see them do that a little bit more.
But to your point, if the Clippers decide that, hey, let's just feed Marcus Morris and have him try to play bully ball, I think the Mavericks are okay with Kawhi Leonard standing on the wing and watching that.
Yeah, just here and there. Particularly if Kawhi is on the bench, right? Like if it's the Paul George only minutes and they're getting that matchup, which in some cases it is, then go to that. I thought Kawhi pick and rolls with their smaller players started to get a little momentum. He started to find some comfort zones with that in games 3 and 4. That'll be interesting. But look, if Paul George starts to play well, the Clippers are better. But I think I picked Clippers in 6. Maybe I got really aggressive and picked 5. But I thought that it would be a very competitive series. And the games would be tough.
I'd go Clippers in 6, but I'll be honest with you, I kind of gave the hometown extra game factor in there just because I didn't want to hear any crap from the Mavericks.
Can we talk for it's amazing that we hear crap for playoff picks. It really is.
Well, I also picked Thunder in 7, and I'm sure that I'm sure my friends in Houston will remind me of that if the Rockets are able to.
Hey, that series has been a lot of fun. The only reason I'm not talking about that on this podcast is the game tips off in 2 hours. There's no point in analyzing what's happened. Let's talk for 5 minutes about Donovan Mitchell because we just have to. That guy. Now again, the Nuggets defense has been absolutely atrocious. Yeah. Poor Mike Malone is just playing whack-a-mole with these matchups. Can you guard that guy? Okay, you can't guard that guy. You guard that guy. Oh, you can't guard that guy. Okay, can you guard the vending guy? Like we can't hide everybody that we need to hide in hiding places. But Donovan Mitchell is making everything. Threes, floaters, layups, abusing Michael Porter, abusing Nikola Jokic, getting any matchup he wants, and he's averaging 40, I think, right now.
And look at the efficiency. I mean, last year against the Rockets, he averaged like 21 or whatever, but he shot 32% from the floor. I mean, it was awful. It was a terrible series for him. Dude, this guy, I'm not looking at the numbers right now, but he's got to be shooting about 60% in the series, and he's lighting it up from 3.
56%, 51% from 3.
Right, and he's just – it's the pick and roll, and everyone's worried about the Gobert Donovan chemistry. The chemistry looks pretty good right now.
Gobert has been very quietly. Gobert is having an incredible series.
Yeah, and it's funny because, Gobert just sets these left tackle type of screens, and Donovan's just walking into these threes, boom, boom, boom. But even just walking into them to shoot 51% from 3, my God. And, so Donovan's got 2 50-plus point games in this series. That's something only Jordan Iverson had done in a single series before. In some ways, though, I thought that his game, what was it? Was it game 2 or 3? The 30-point game when he had 30 and 8. But he had 30 and 8 on 14 field goal attempts. I thought that might have been his most impressive game just because he's not out there just hunting shots. He is making all the right reads, and that's a game where they basically I think the Nuggets decide, okay, hey, we're not going to let Donovan Mitchell kill us, and next thing you know, it's just lob Rudy, and they just like you said, no matter what Malone's trying, they just don't have any hope against Donovan right now.
Well, and Malone has tried everything. In Game 4, he settled on, we're just going to have Jokic hang back in the paint and try to help a little bit less off their shooters. That didn't work. He's tried switching. That's a disaster. He's tried. One thing they have to do is they're just conceding. Denver is just giving up these switches without any kind of fight at all. Like, Mike Conley just runs by Donovan Mitchell, and they switch Monte Morris onto him. Joe Ingles just jogs in the general vicinity of Donovan Mitchell, and they switch Michael Porter Jr. onto him. Like, they have to, and they had started to do it toward the end of Game 4. They have to try to hedge or trap, and Michael Porter can't really do those things very well, but you have to try. You can't just give up these switches. But Mitchell, and he's thrown 7. His passing is better. His passing is really improved. Yeah. He threw a couple passes last night where instead of the pass. He threw the pass that was like one link in the chain ahead of where you would normally throw it a couple of times, and like early. He saw it early, and I was like, ooh, this guy is like, there's a little bit of a leap in progress here. This is like big stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, that's what we're also seeing is why Johnny Bryant, got that associate head coach job with the New York Knicks, because Johnny Bryant has done a spectacular job overseeing Donovan Mitchell's development. And you look, when you're evaluating Donovan Mitchell, you have to kind of keep the big picture in context, and that is this guy was primarily a baseball player until about the age of 16. He was a bench player as a freshman at Louisville. He had 1 year as a go-to guy at Louisville. And by the way, his offensive responsibilities increased significantly from his sophomore year in college to his rookie year in the NBA. That doesn't happen. And so Donovan is, he arrived in the NBA very raw. And for him to be that raw and to be able to be a go-to guy on a playoff team right off the bat is remarkable. But what we're seeing is just him steadily progressing as a playmaker. And, like you said, it looks like kind of the steady progress has taken a quantum leap. And if he's going to shoot the threes that well, I don't know what you do with a guy who's that good off the dribble and is seeing the floor the way he's seeing it right now.
A guy I'm also happy for is Mike Conley, who came back to the bubble and has played really well. And
he got that Fred VanVleet, newborn baby boost.
Well, he's got that. There's nothing. There can't be very many things with being like a new father, but not having to have the sleep deprivation. Like, I know I have a new kid. He's probably really cute. Or I can't remember if it's a boy or girl. Really cute. Getting FaceTime. Now I'm going to go to bed and get like 9 hours of sleep.
Get to watch the diaper changing on FaceTime. Oh, I wish I was there.
But he had a rough start to the season. He had Utah fans like constructing fake trades, attaching picks to get rid of him, this, that, and the other thing. He's had some bad injuries in playoffs past, and like he's just rolling right now. He's comfortable, and that's been fun. And how weird is Joe Ingles, where he can score 2 points combined over 2 games, and you think like he played pretty well. I don't have a huge problem with Joe Ingles scoring 2 points in 2 games.
Yeah, I remember there was some point fairly late in last night's game. I'm just scanning the box score. And it's like Joe Ingles is scoreless with 1 assist, and he's plus 11 at the time.
35 minutes. 0 for 4, I think. Did he have 1 point? No, I had no points. He had no points. Mitchell has been unbelievable. Tony Bradley's playing well off the bench for them. Royce O'Neal's playing well. Like, they're just...
Jordan Clarkson's playing well. Look, they had to completely reconstruct their bench on the fly. But I didn't think the Jazz were going to win a first-round series. As soon as Bogdanovich went down, I was like, the Jazz they're screwed.
Now, and to be fair, Denver is missing 2 guys who were starters. And give them some semblance of two-way play. And they have, Jeremy Grant has probably been their closest thing to a two-way player in this series. Every move they make is a trade-off between shooting and defense. And, long term, they got to figure out, can they ever defend even average with Murray, Porter, and Jokic on the floor? Because Jokic has been bad. It's not all his fault because the guys guarding the ball handlers are falling way behind these picks and getting killed and leaving too much space. Murray's going to top out as okay. Porter has been so bad that it flirts with like unplayable against starters, and that's the conclusion Michael Malone came to. Is like, I just can't play you against their best lineups. You have to come off the bench.
We're seeing why, despite the obvious talent and skill, he didn't play a whole lot this year. And honestly, if Michael Porter's not, if he didn't have the back injuries, he'd have been a top 2 or 3 pick, and he'd be lighting it up for a lottery team right now. But he goes where he went. He ends up landing on a playoff team, and it's tough to prioritize the development of a young dude, even that talented, when you're trying to win playoff games and playoff series.
And again, Denver's banged up. Jokic had the coronavirus. You just don't know how to evaluate these. They're playing in a bubble. Yeah, you just don't know how to evaluate these things. But it's been a bad series. All right, Tim MacMahon wrote a great piece on Luka's game last night. What else you got in the works? What can we look forward to?
We got more Luka stuff coming up. Old Pelton and I are comboing on a Luka comp piece. And as you know, when you talk about Luka, everybody wants to talk about the all the legends that he reminds them of. So we're working on a little something there.
You and Pelton, that's an odd couple. I like that.
Yeah, usually I like to work with people a little bit more intelligent, but I'm gonna play dumb on this one.
I was going to say, I would imagine, I can see you making fun of Pelton frequently in your collaboration, which makes me happy. All right, Tim MacMahon, all your work is awesome. It's good to see you. Stay safe down there in the heartland, and hopefully, like I said last time, I'd love to drink a beer at some point in LA or one of our annual meetings before 2023.
We'll get there, brother.
Thanks, bud.
Appreciate you having me.
Goodyear believes that movement drives us forward, that every mile traveled brings us one step closer to our goals. But Goodyear also believes in the importance of a rest stop, taking a breather to pause and reflect on the road ahead. Sometimes that's all we need to keep going. A moment to compose ourselves before we start moving forward again. So as you get ready to start moving again, Goodyear's here to help. Visit Goodyear.com to learn more. Goodyear, more driven. Yes, live sports are finally back, just like the rest of us. And now that we're all getting back on the road again, the stops we make seem more special than before, like stopping to watch the game at our friend's place with appropriate protocols, of course, or stopping at our favorite spot to cheer every amazing shot, score, and win, again with appropriate protocols. And between those stops, there's Shell. Stop in to fill up with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. It's their best fuel ever, and it'll help keep your engine running like new. Stop in to save with the Fuel Rewards program. Just download the app or go to fuelrewards.com to join. You'll never pay full price for gas again. And finally, stop in to get snacks and essentials that can save you even more at the pump. That's just a few of the ways Shell helps you make the most of the stop you need to make. See full terms and conditions at fuelrewards.com and engines that continuously use Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. With surprisingly great rates, State Farm is the real deal in car and home insurance. State Farm agents are ready to help with personalized service so you can customize your insurance. All of this is backed up by award-winning, easy-to-use technology. You can manage your coverage, pay your bill, and file a claim with the State Farm mobile app. It's a great price with even greater service. So when you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Okay, let's welcome in friend of the program, Yaron Weitzman, author of Tanking to the Top, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the most audacious process in the history of professional sports. And Yaron is also a Bleacher Report and wrote a little autopsy on the 76ers disastrous sweep this morning. How are you, Yaron?
I'm okay, Zach. I'm okay. Hanging in.
So hanging in, exactly. So today's my birthday. And for my birthday, I get three things. Okay?
Yeah.
Number one, I get 100 hugs from my daughter. I negotiated that. I think I have 97 remaining. Number two, I get to order Indian food tonight. Number three, I get to talk about the Sixers on my podcast. That's the third thing I get to say. And let me open by saying this. I see a lot of people throwing dirt on the Sixers today, okay? Burying the Sixers, talking about what a disaster the offseason was. And some of those people 8 months ago, whenever we were doing this, picked this same team to go very, very far in the playoffs, and in some cases, all the way in the playoffs. And so my thing is, you can't trash the roster as a disaster if 10 months ago you picked them to win the title. Or you can, because it turned out to be a disaster, but you must acknowledge that you fell for the disaster. So I will open this by acknowledging that I picked the Philadelphia 76ers to advance to the NBA Finals this season and lose to the Los Angeles Clippers. I completely misread this team. And it's funny, I actually listened to a podcast I recorded with Jay Williams on July 2nd after Jimmy Butler left for Miami, Josh Richardson in, Al Horford in, JJ Redick out. And some of the things I said on that podcast were, quote, who's creating for this team off the dribble and crunch time? People are making Al Horford out to be Dirk Nowitzki, and he's not. Tobias Harris is a below-average passer. Tobias Harris guarding small forwards scares me. I think with their offense, they should rank about where they did this past season, which was 11th. And yet, having said all of that, what I fell for was, A, their defense. I thought they could be a historically great defense. They were not close. And B, I fell for, and I will admit, I fetishize defense a little bit. I fell for the idea that this team with its defense and its size was, quote, built for the playoffs. They fell for that idea too. And it turns out built for the playoffs in 2020, which I knew and should have known and should have reminded myself, as the Clippers and the Mavericks and the Jazz and all these other teams are reminding us, is about shooting and spacing and ball handling and not size and defense unless you're going to have a historically great defense. So do not bury the Sixers as a disaster if you thought this team was going to be good, and I thought they were going to be good. That said, this is an absolute disaster. And we can start in a million different places. You wrote a book about this team. What has this sweep made you reflect on?
That's a good question. One of the things I've struggled with most in doing this, and like you said, I wrote a piece and I struggled with this in the piece. There's so much context required and that goes into analyzing everything that went wrong here. Like, it's not just Brett Brown's fault, and it's not just the front office. And to understand why this front office is in place and why they made their mistakes, you have to go back to Colangelo and then what happened in the wake of him, and then Hinkie and why that all went wrong and how ownership acts. And there's just a million different things. I think Mike Levin, our mutual friend, the Rights to Ricky Sanchez guys, when I was on that podcast, he called it he's like, this is a book of context. And I thought that was pretty good. So in terms of struggling, it's just how do you unpack who's to blame or where blame properly lies here when what we're seeing, I think, is a culmination of years of mishaps.
There are 3 pivot points to me in how we arrived here. The number one and most important one is the selection of Markelle Fultz with the number 1 pick in 2017.
Yep.
For which they traded a future pick from the Kings, which was a very valuable trade asset that turned out to be less valuable than people thought. And, of course, the number 3 pick, which was used on Jason Tatum. If Markelle Fultz is good, everything stops there. If Markelle Fultz is what everyone expected, there is probably no Jimmy Butler trade. There is just none of this madness that has engulfed the team occurs. The second pivot point is giving up 2 first-round picks in Landry Shamet for Tobias Harris, which is Tobias Harris is fine. He's an okay to good player, a wonderful teammate. As we saw in Game 4, competitive as all hell, and just not good enough to make $35 to $40 million a year. Just doesn't pass, doesn't get to the free throw line, doesn't shoot enough threes, blah, blah, blah. We all know. And the third pivot point is deciding to move off of Butler. And that is the one that I think, although I said on that July 2nd podcast, who's creating off the dribble in crunch time, that's the one that I think, in getting swept up in what this team could be defensively, that's the one that I underestimated. Because I think Jimmy Butler actually fit with this team pretty damn well. And that decision, and to replace him with Josh Richardson, who's good, and Al Horford, who is good but is not a fit on this team, is ultimately one that I think was wrong and that they will regret. So pick any one of those 3 pivot points. You know what? Let's start with Butler.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't even know. Like why? Why did they do it? What's your read on why they went that direction?
So it's really complicated to answer, and like you and I were talking a little before, right? There are all these different reports that have come out on different things, and obviously people have different agendas. I think there are, or I should say more than I think. My read on it is that there are a few reasons. One, and it goes back to the column you wrote last year on, and this isn't the first reason, or the primary reason, but the Ben Simmons stuff I think was a real thing. I forget, what was the quote? What did Ben say to you about the dunker spot last year in the playoffs?
He said, I definitely don't think that that's my role. Basically, definitely
right.
Don't, I think was in the quote. And as I've said on this podcast, when I asked him that question, his eyes lit up when he looked at me, as if to say, look at my eyes.
Right.
My words will only say so much. Look at my eyes. And his eyes said, thanks for asking. I'm not happy.
Yeah, I think that part of it has been underplayed a bit in terms of the retelling of why Jimmy Butler is no longer here, the issues that would have created if Butler remained, and the idea being that if he's running the half-court offense the way he had in the playoffs, right? The way Brett Brown took the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands, and as most people would say, correctly so. That was one of Brett Brown's better moves as a coach. There's that. They over-panicked to the no backup center thing. The idea that, I forget the numbers, maybe you know them by heart, there's something ridiculous when he was off the floor, when Embiid was off the floor against Toronto.
I think it's minus 99.
Something ridiculous.
It's like minus when the score in Space Jam, when the
Right,
Monstars is just like moving up really fast. It's like minus that.
So there's that. They over panicked that. They assumed Embiid would be missing about 20 games. So they figured between those 20 games, and I'm not saying this is the correct thinking, but I believe this is what they were thinking. So that between the 20 games that Embiid would miss and then the backup minutes that they needed at center, Horford would be good there. They figured Horford could do a decent job guarding Giannis Antetokounmpo. Brett Brown, the whole Brett Brown-Jimmy relationship is pretty well. I mean, I wrote about it in the book, but it's been, you don't even need my book anymore to tell us about that. There are plenty of quotes from either of them that tell us all we needed to know about how they got along. This part's complicated because Brett made very clear throughout the year that he was not happy with, or he was frustrated, I should say, by Butler and coaching Butler, and he wouldn't be the first coach to say so. But I wrote today that in the end, he made clear that he was okay with Butler coming back, that he could coach Butler. That doesn't mean necessarily that the Sixers thought that partnership could work. That's the other part of it.
That's
right?
That's an important distinction. So in your book,
Yes.
you wrote today that he was okay ultimately with it. Now, when you put it that way, it sounds like it's like, I'm okay eating my cauliflower, I guess, after dinner, or I'm okay with it. I'm not psyched about it. And as you said, the higher ups may have thought, well, I don't want a dynamic where my coach thinks of Jimmy Butler as the cauliflower with his dinner.
And the opposite should be said. Butler was not a fan of Brown either.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want a dynamic. I'm saying maybe the front office thought this. I think they did, frankly. No matter what Brett Brown said in the end, yes or no, I think the front office and the ownership thought, well, I'm not sure we want a dynamic here where one of our stars and our coach are sort of holding their nose to coexist together. And I think that's just something we don't want to live with. Because in your book, you said Brown lobbied against the re-signing of Butler. And I think just that discrepancy points to the truth is often buried underneath these semantics of, did you want him or did you want him? You know what I mean? It's a very hard thing to figure out. In the end, I think the team just thought the Simmons stuff and the Brown stuff, it's just too messy. It's too messy. Let's just not have it around anymore, right? Is that fair?
Yep, I would say that's fair. And I mean, you said Butler is a perfect fit. I think we've learned also, you saying on the court, but I think off the court, as difficult as he can be sometimes, I think he took a load off of Embiid and Simmons, and he was able to do some locker room stuff. He had some fire to him in a way that those two do not. And I think, you've seen how many times we heard Embiid on different podcasts talk about how much he misses Jimmy Butler. I do think I think they miss him.
I think what you said before about Horford resonates with me, because I think the Sixers and in reacting to their signings, me too, got caught up in matchups and not team building. I think they had become obsessed with A, who gives Giannis trouble, and B, who gives Embiid trouble. And in Horford, they felt they found an answer to both of those questions. And what ended up happening in the Eastern Conference is, and I think they probably knew Kawhi was leaving, and so they didn't necessarily concern themselves with the Raptors. And what happened was the Raptors stayed awesome, the Celtics got awesome, and the Bucks were the Bucks. And all of a sudden, I actually do think the Sixers fully healthy represented an interesting matchup for Milwaukee. They would have been underdogs in this series, but I think they do have the personnel to bother Milwaukee a little bit, and have shown it here and there. Although Giannis has solved that Horford matchup, and frankly, it was clear, and I wrote this last year or said it. It was clear in the Celtics series last year that Giannis had grown comfortable attacking Horford. He had figured it out. And I just think they talked themselves into building a team that was too specifically designed and not designed with a broad enough conception in mind.
It's a very narrow way of looking at the league, right? That nothing else is changing except the additions you made to your team. And I think that's what happened. I think that's exactly what happened here.
The other thing is, so it seems an inevitability that Brett is not going to be the coach, maybe even after we record this podcast. I don't know.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I found interesting, and you mentioned Jimmy Butler and lighting a fire. There's been all of this noise for years and years that the Sixers that don't have a culture of accountability on their team, that Joel can do whatever he wants, and Ben can do whatever he wants, and you have a lot of whatever they want examples in your book that I don't want to spoil. And that the root of some of that is that Brett Brown is an inherently very nice person who does not enjoy confronting other people in an aggressive or confrontational manner. And you have this anecdote in your book that I'm not going to spoil most of the best anecdotes in your books, but I'm going to spoil two.
Spoil away now.
This is the first one. You have an anecdote in here, and of course I have my book on the wrong freaking page, but it's essentially about, I want you to describe it. It's essentially the team holding what amounts to an intervention for Brett Brown about Joel Embiid. Can you describe this, please?
Sure.
By the way, this has not been reported anywhere as far as I know, and I want to congratulate you because one of the difficulties of writing a book about a team that has been covered to this degree is the burden of finding stuff that is new, and you found a lot of stuff that is new, including this. That's really hard. Congratulations. Tell the story.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, the story. So Embiid, this is Embiid's first year. I guess, do we call it his rookie? I don't know, first year. I won't say his rookie year. It's his first year with the team. And again, context is important. That year, I forget, I'm going to get some of the timeline off, but he finds out, he's out for the year with the injury, and he finds out his brother, I believe he was 13 years old, is tragically killed back in Cameroon in an accident. That wrecks Embiid, as it would anyone, right? So again, the context of this stuff and why it's so hard to analyze it all in a bubble. Embiid comes back. I think he would later even describe himself as depressed. He's dealing with that. He's not playing. His weight's ballooning. He's not, and these stories were documented before, some of the not training, getting in arguments with strength coaches, some of his eating habits, the Shirley Temples, things like that. He's giving everyone lots of problems to the extent that at one point Embiid, middle of the year, I think this was after, I believe it was after he was sent home for the argument with the strength coach. Brett Brown is pulled into a room, and there are dozens of team staffers from, coaches, strength coaches, all that stuff. Basically, someone gets up and says, "Coach, we're here because Joel's giving us all a problem, and there's nothing, we need to do something about it." And Brett starts yelling. He gets upset at his chief of staff, assistant coach Billy Lang, who now is in St. Joseph's, I believe. He yells at him. There's some expletives. Brett likes to throw some expletives around every now and then, or more than every now and then. Why didn't I know about this? How come no one told me? This has to stop. They're saying they did tell him. And I just think it was very telling of some of the problems that these things were going on. And either he didn't know about it, as he's saying, but if he's saying he doesn't know about it, I don't know if that's much better, to be honest, right? As opposed to knowing about it, not doing anything about it. Like, I don't know which argument or which defense he wants to be lobbying for himself. And there are all sorts of stories like that. So again, the example is there's a reason Embiid's not just being a pain in the ass for the hell of it. There are genuine reasons why someone that young in that situation might be acting this way. But if you don't nip things in a bud early on and players become more powerful and they see them get away with things, anyone who's a parent knows this, right? It becomes really difficult to change that later on.
Well, I'm tired of saying it. The Sixers aren't going where they should be able to. And I think part of my faith in the Sixers this year was Joel off playoff heartbreak and talking all about, I want to be the third guy to win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, is going to get in shape and stay in shape and play hard all the time. Did not happen. And B, Ben Simmons is going to shoot token three-pointers. One a game. Did not happen. In fact, almost passive-aggressively undermining the entire team. And by the way, Brett Brown's not the only one to go over to Ben Simmons and say, "Will you shoot?" I mean, many people on the team have been telling him this for years. That didn't happen either. And I'm tired of saying it, but they're not going where they can go as a duo until all of those things happen. And they did not happen this year. I was hopeful that they would. And I thought it was telling after yesterday's game, the sweep game, that Josh Richardson said, something to the effect of, "We need more." Brett's a nice guy.
He said it out loud. No one said it out. No one has said it out loud before. Josh Richardson, who's been frustrated all year, and I mean, maybe not the best move for him personally in that locker room, but maybe that tells you what you want to know about what he expects coming up. No one said it out loud before. It's been whispered and people hint at it and blah, 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 but nobody has said it out loud like that.
He's said it a couple times out loud this year. This one got attention because of the context, the sweep. He said, we need accountability. And I think it's Josh Richardson comes from Miami.
Yep.
Jimmy Butler's in Miami. I think that's the sort of common denominator of the cultural difference between the two teams and the two coaching staffs and the tone that Pat Riley has set from the top in Miami. I don't think Brett has been a great playoff coach, although I will say I think he actually held his own and maybe outcoached Nick Nurse last year in the conference semifinals. I think he coached a great series in that series. This series, I thought, and I said this last week, I thought game 2 was a really bad game. I thought it was a bad game for him personally. And if there was anybody on the fence in Philly, I think that game, it would have pushed them over the fence.
Slow adjustments, some of the classic, like slow adjustments, not prepared for the post offense, things like that, right? Some of the classic.
Well, just the thing that drove me nuts when I was watching the game was just leaving Shake Milton out to die against Kemba Walker. And Kemba Walker is, I've already addressed it. It doesn't matter. But Brett Brown didn't draft Markelle Fultz. He didn't trade for Tobias Harris. Mm-hmm. And he didn't sign Al Horford to a contract that is now so negative that the Sixers are going to have to incentivize teams to get off of it. And frankly, I sat there last night trying to find Al Horford trades, and good luck, it's not easy. So let's talk about Fultz.
Sure.
Because that's just, that's Greg Oden. That's just, you can't, that's unrecoverable. That's an organizational catastrophe that can set a team back for 10, 15 years. And the only reason it didn't is because Sam Hinkie had gotten them so many high picks. And by the way, I think Sam Hinkie's draft record is kind of overrated. Like there's some bad misses.
Careful, Zach. They're going to come after you. Careful.
Well, no. Look, Sam did a great job. I think Sam ultimately put them in position where I don't think it was a layup to go from 50 wins to championship contention. People want to characterize it as a layup because they had so many assets. Let me say this. That is never a layup for anybody.
No, that's the hard part.
Unless you have LeBron James or Giannis or Luka or one of these transformational all-time great guys, and Embiid and Simmons are not at that level yet. Unless you have one of those guys, that's not a layup no matter how many sexy future draft picks you have. It's just not. No matter how much cap space you have. It's not. That's not a layup. But he put them in very good position to do it. But the Fultz, and the only reason the Fultz pick isn't an organizational catastrophe that just destroys your team is because Embiid and Simmons are already there. To my knowledge, and this is the second anecdote in your book that I'm going to spoil, you are the only person who has any on the record or even on background information about Markelle Fultz's workout with the Boston Celtics, which was maybe the final straw in getting Boston to say, let's take the Tatum kid that we know a lot about because we have some Duke connections. You have, so here's what you say in your book, page 183, Yaron, if you need me to refresh your memory.
Well, I was going to ask you, sometimes I'm forgetting when I use on the record or on background, so I was going to ask you to remind me if I'm quoting people there.
Oh, you're quoting somebody by name, my friend.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. That's good. Okay.
And you talk about how Fultz struggled in his workout. And here is Keith Williams, a longtime Fultz mentor and trainer, explaining why he struggled in his Boston workout. There was no music, the gym was quiet, and there were just all these older white men staring at him, said Keith Williams. He was nervous. The Celtics people have never spoken, not even off the record, about what happened in that workout. You got Keith Williams, his longtime family friend and associate, to say that, which is, to say the least, an interesting quote. He also was not great at his Sixers workouts, correct, according to your book?
Yeah, no, he was. I think not great would be overestimating it, right? He was pretty bad.
So let me ask you this: if I read your book and I read the Fultz section, and I have, my takeaway from all of your exhaustive reporting is that Yaron Weitzman thinks, in the end, this is just my takeaway. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying this is what, as a reader, came across to me.
Yep.
Yaron Weitzman, who has a point of view, he's the author of the book, thinks that Markelle Fultz had a mental breakdown. That was the cause of what happened. Am I accurately portraying your ultimate conclusion?
Let me, how about this? I wouldn't use the word mental breakdown. I guess I'll answer the question like this, right? I wrote the chapter. I did a lot of reporting on that, spoke to a lot of people, and I wrote it in the language I did and for a specific reason. So I guess that maybe answers your question. There are lots of things there. Here, I'm evading a little bit purposely.
That did not answer my question.
I know, I'm evading a little bit purposely just because, you get once you get threatened a few times, you try to be careful with the wording you use. The stuff with his mother, I thought was really telling in terms of telling his whole story, and I think that was maybe.
And don't spoil that. There's a lot. People should buy this book if only for the Fultz chapter. That alone is worth it.
So I guess what I would say is there was a lot going on in his life that, and I know I'm being annoying here, but that's okay. That emotionally, I think made it a little difficult for him. I also think it's key to remember a key part of Fultz's background, and I compared this to Simmons, right? A lot of number one picks these days, they're kind of trained for the spotlight at the age of 11, 12, 13. They kind of come up as celebrities, Instagram mixtapes, all that stuff. Fultz was playing JV basketball as a sophomore still. So this happened really fast and really late for him, the whole being thrust into the spotlight. And just like we think about with child actors, I think when that happens, that can create sort of difficulties or tensions around a family, for an individual. How's that?
Fair. There's a lot of stuff in there about Markelle's mother. That chapter, I had heard rumors about all that stuff, but some of it, not all of it. I had never been able to report it to the point where I felt comfortable writing it. You got there, and again, that is not easy to do. So, I mean, look, that's why I think ultimately, I'm not sure Brett is the only one that's gonna, if indeed what everyone is thinking happens to Brett. I'm not sure he's going to be the only casualty of this because those are not his decisions. Those are front office decisions. And I think Elton is safe. Elton Brand's option got picked up recently. I think Elton is sharp. I think everyone there is, look, people in throwing around blame want to call people idiots and morons. Smart people make bad decisions. Smart people make well-intended bad decisions. And I think that's what happened here. And I think some of those people who are holdovers of the Colangelo regime, and that's a whole other bottle of worms that there's bottle of worms, can of worms, whatever, some container holding worms.
I want to add something also with the whole front office in terms of criticism. I agree. I do think, you do this all the time, right? You play the results. There were a few bounces away last year, not from winning the championship. You don't know what happens, but they went for it last year. And I think plenty of fans would have been happy if the same moves happened and they won a championship. So I just, again, you know this, right? It's just people... We all lose perspective a little bit once the final result happens.
Yes, you do. And again, that's why I think if you're going to bury them today, and you're going to say what a disaster this is and how these people are idiots and did this wrong and that wrong. Like if you're at ESPN, the average expert pick was 55 wins. They had the third most people picking, the third biggest championship odds, according to all of our people, dozens and dozens of them. If you're gonna bury them today, you gotta cop to it. You gotta cop to it if you were one of those people, and I was. But the moves did not work. The question, and also, by the way, you can't spare ownership here.
No, absolutely
not. Josh Harris, David Blitzer, and in your book, David Heller, who is no longer part of the ownership group, have been active all along. And I actually think what happens now is going to be very, very interesting because if there is regime change in the front office, that raises more I think if Elton stays in power, my guess would be that Simmons and Embiid are still on the team next year. I think both Simmons and Embiid will probably be on the team, period. And I think that would be the right decision. It's too early to me. I think you give another coach and some roster tweaks and see what happens. But if there's regime change, to me, that opens the door a teensy bit, if only because, and this is back to ownership, these guys are private equity guys, and they like to make trades. And I think that mindset has permeated the whole organization in the time that they've been here. I mean, these guys trade a lot. They trade picks. They've sold picks for cash, which has been kind of an underplayed thing. They traded like tons of trade. That Tobias Harris trade is like a fantasy basketball trade. They like to make trades. And I don't think that's just the front office. I think the ownership is it's a very transactional, hungry, fingers on the button kind of group.
And they can be swayed ownership. And that's been a big thing with them. If whoever's is, it was Doug Collins, it was Sam Hinkie, it was Jerry Colangelo, it's just whoever it is, they can be swayed or be beholden to these bigger personalities who come in and say, this is how we're doing things. This is how I want to do things. This is why it makes sense.
And it wasn't hard to see these questions coming. Like I said it on that July 2nd podcast. I went to Philly in the fall to write a feature on the team. Part of the feature was about how they had pretty good chemistry early in the season, and they did. Mm-hmm. You even wrote in your book that before Game 7 of Raptors-Sixers, Joe and Ben had a nice conversation.
Yeah, I was there,
Yeah, they had really kind of thawed. Their relationship had kind of improved. And Tobias Harris in that story said to me something interesting. He basically said, all that good chemistry stuff is cool when you're winning. The real test is going to come when we get some adversity. What does your culture look like when you have a 5-game losing streak? And the answer to that question was bad. It falls apart.
Yeah, poop, right? That's what I was going to say. It's and again, not to beat a dead horse, I do think a lot of that goes back to Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, right? It's like you're going to be – you've talked about this a lot, right? And I wrote a profile on him a few years ago, similar things. Damian Lillard is kind of the prime example of how a superstar – what – leadership and culture actually looks like, not in the corny cliche ways that we talk about and you don't actually know what that means tangibly, but there are tangible ways for a franchise superstar or franchise superstars to be examples, to lead their team, to actually make change. And Embiid and Simmons have not shown the ability to do so yet.
No, not yet. They're young. They're young. I do think they can win together. It's boring to say this. I think it's possible that they can build a championship roster around those guys. I also, if you force me to make a bet, is one of them traded in the next 3 years? I would bet that. But I think both of those things are possible. They stay together for 10 years and win a championship eventually, or this process ends. Well, to use a word, this process ends soon. Speaking of the process, let me just simplify this. Is Sam Hinkie still the president of the team if the Jahlil Okafor situation doesn't go haywire? And that's not how I phrased it. I didn't say if Jahlil Okafor's behavior is better, because Jahlil Okafor was going through a lot of stuff personally and emotionally, and I think it's clear from your book the team did not support him. The team did not provide him the infrastructure he needed as a young player, a little bit out of his depth in the NBA. They didn't have enough security. We can go through the whole thing. So I'm not saying it's Jahlil Okafor's fault that he got caught. I mean, to some degree, everyone is accountable for their own behavior. I get that. But it's not as simple as saying Jahlil Okafor up and got in a bar fight in Boston and it was on TV and sped over the whatever bridge and this and that. But simplifying, if Jahlil Okafor is just a run-of-the-mill rookie that doesn't work out, no off-court incidents, you think Sam Hinkie keeps the job?
Ooh, it's a good one. I don't know how he's not relieved that quickly. What happens as time goes on, I don't know. There was enough momentum throughout the league, whether it's from other major agents. Like someone told me Jeff Schwartz, who's a major agent, XL Sports. They represent a ton of players. After Sam traded Michael Carter-Williams without Jeff Schwartz felt like he wasn't given enough notice. He made a decree we will not be dealing with Sam Hinkie anymore. There's issues inside the building with Sam and especially Scott O'Neal, who we didn't mention before in terms of the Sixers power structure and people making decisions, the team CEO
Well, the power structure, I'm glad you said that because it's just a mess. There are too many people in the room. There are too many people with decision-making power. And that's why it's so hard to parse, who made this decision. Brett Brown is the de facto GM for a hot second and during an important period of time.
And then even then the minority owner is overruling about who to draft, right?
It's just you just can't have this. You want to have voices in a room. Yeah, you want to have a lot of smart people exchanging ideas in a room. You also just have to have a clear hierarchy of this is the guy in the ownership group and this is the guy in the front office group. And these are the two guys. If the owner wants to be involved, these are the two guys who are going to make this decision. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, and I do believe that they might be closer to that now as the season's gone on in terms of some of the more organized and it being more Elton. Right? Not all season, but I do believe that's happened recently. In terms of Hinkie, so there are all these forces. The union was angry at him. The league was angry. Opposing owners. I think this is always a key part, right? Opposing owners were annoyed, and Josh Harris has made it very clear that he cares what other people think about him. And I do think part of the fun of owning an NBA team is that you can say you're owning an NBA team, and it's probably not fun if all your other billionaire buddies are complaining to you about your team stinks and you're dragging our bottom line down and what the hell is going on over there.
By the way, only in that one season when they went 10-72, that was the only year they had the worst record in the league.
Yep.
Orlando was about as bad as them for almost the entire capital P process.
The narrative became larger than the story, than the actual thing, right?
And you write that in your book. This has always bugged me about Hinkie. What Hinkie did was the simplest thing you could possibly do in the NBA. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't this like, oh my God, he discovered plutonium by accident. All he did was tank. That's it. He got to a team that was out picks because of the Bynum disaster and was mediocre, and he blew it up, and he was going to tank for as long as possible. It's so obvious. It's so easy. You could do it. I could do it. It doesn't take a genius to do it. What it takes is buy-in from the people above you who know what kind of pain is coming. Now, there are degrees of it, and obviously drafting injured players and not signing veterans and this and that took it to a pretty extreme degree. But it's so simple that the NBA changed the freaking rules so nobody could do it again. That's how easy it is. The NBA was like, no, we can't have this happening again. Our rules are too obvious. We need to make them less obvious. And
the tanking thing's funny because Hinkie gets labeled as the tanking guy, and you talk to people around him, and it's like, he's not a tanking guy. He came from Houston. They had Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming. They didn't tank. It was more of, I always describe it as like the equation. We need to get to championship. This is where we are. How do we get from A to B? Okay, the best way is, in this case, the tank, right? I don't know what we're answering. Whether Hinkie would still be there. So there are all these other forces around. I don't know. It was getting tough for him. The Okafor, I always describe the Okafor thing as like the straw that broke the camel's back, to use a fantastic cliche. It's just that being on TV. Like I have a quote in there from the Sixers security guy who says NBA security called him and said the commissioner wants to know why one of our players is on TV. On TMZ for being drunk, and no one from the Sixers has notified us.
It seems like a bad phone call to get.
I would say it's not great. Yeah, I would say it's not great. So it would have bought him a little more time for fair or not, and both, right? I do think the tide was kind of turning against Hinkie from all these. The NBA is a small world. You know this, right? You're dealing with the same people over and over and over, and it can be hard if you kind of blow up all those relationships.
What can they do now?
Pray. No. The Simmons and Embiid thing is fascinating. I wrote this a little bit today. I'd be curious to get your take on it. It's not. They're at a point now where like it used to be, would you trade one of them because you don't think the fit is good, right? Now I think you have to look at, do we need to trade one of them because there's no other way out of here, and that's our best way to kind of build. We basically go more for fit over talent, and that has to be part of the equation, where that was never one of the issues before.
It's a great way to put it, because Tobias to me is no one's untradeable. Tobias is tradable only for an equally bad contract,
right?
And even then, you might have to incentivize. Horford's trades only come in one of a few flavors. Number one, a team thinks it's Al Horford away from winning a championship. I don't think that team exists.
No.
Number two, you salary dump him to a team with cap room like the Pistons, and you attach a first round pick. And by the way, I think the Pistons say, how about another one? Because we have no use for Al Horford. And number three is the same kind of deal we just talked about. You take someone else's problematic long-term contract. And frankly, this gets even harder in a pandemic when the cap situation is going to be. Like, I just don't know. There is no easy way out of any of this. And to me, the solution is then you just hunker down and eat it, because I'm not trading one of those guys from a position of weakness. You can trash Simmons all you want. You put Simmons on the market, there are going to be teams lined up to give you stuff for Ben Simmons. Embiid is trickier. You could get a lot of stuff for Embiid, but there are questions about his health and his conditioning and all of that, which is why I've always said it's easier to talk in theory about dealing Simmons and building your team around Embiid. I mean, that's a very simple thing. Spacing and Joel Embiid, that works. Okay, you got to have faith that Joel Embiid's going to be healthy for 5 to 10 years. So I don't know what they're going to do, but I'll tell you this: finding an Al Horford trade ain't easy.
No, like what if he was on the market now? What contract? Let's say he was a free agent right now. What would he get?
Amid a pandemic, a 1-year contract,
right?
A 1-year contract of some amount, from the mid-level exception from a team that's trying to win or is capped out to, I don't know what else, but I don't see a multi-year contract for him. And you have teams that are still trying to save up cap space for the Giannis summer and the other people's summer. I just, they are in a very tough spot. I will say, in all of everyone's rush to bury everyone on the team, I do think everyone has the token sentence in their stories or their podcasts that's like, well, just FYI, Ben Simmons was out.
Yes.
That has to be more than a token sentence. Ben Simmons is an all-NBA level player. You take a player like that off of any team, Like, it's going to be a problem for most teams. Although the way Paul George is playing, you could take him off the Clippers right now. It wouldn't be that big of a problem. Now, Paul George will probably score 35 tomorrow. But, like, that's a real thing. It's not an excuse. Like, you took Jimmy Butler off the Heat. You take, Kyle Lowry off the Raptors. It's like, it's kind of a problem.
And it's more than, I know you sometimes, but the Celtics had missed Gordon Hayward, and Gordon Hayward is really good. But the value of those individual players to their respective teams, I do not think is comparable. I agree. Yeah, and I did it today. I wrote this whole thing, and I realized
because there's no other way to do it. It's like, the team didn't work, but this thing happened. You have to. I don't know how artfully to do it. By the way, because the Mavs won a game last night against the Clippers without Kristaps Porzingis. Like, you have to find a way. And by the way, one of the guys that helped the win was Trey Burke, who the Sixers had and let go for nothing.
You saying they could use a point guard who can score, dribble, and pass a little bit? That's something the Sixers might be able to use right now.
What a fascinating. I feel like the process is definitely over. I think it's fitting that it began with too many centers and is ending with too many centers. And I feel like it's one of the first stories that I've been able to see from beginning to end, long-term story arcs in my time covering the NBA. But, the Sixers are going to have to pivot and they're going to have to figure it out. And any final thoughts here?
No, I think you're the first one of these book promo things that I wasn't asked. So did the process work? That's usually the one of the early questions I get, which I never know how to answer.
They didn't finish the process. It's unfinished. I
agree. I would agree. I always use the analogy like if you hire an architect to redo your house and then yank him off the job halfway through, can you judge the architect, right? So final thoughts. No, I think it's been quite a ride. I will say this. I will say that.
All right, Yaron Weitzman's book, Tanking to the Top. Buy it. You will learn stuff, and it's a totally entertaining read. Yaron, find another team to write. Find another slant, okay? Find another team to write about now that the Sixers are out, okay?
Thank you, Zach.